Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlinson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. I'm Amy Rowlinson and this is my second Reflections and Observations episode. In my first one, I asked you to reach out and share with me what you have reflected on since listening to these stories from the guests on the show, asking you to share with me what you have observed and what you've changed since listening to them. Oh my goodness, I had no idea that the podcast was having such an impact. I've received so many incredible messages and I have tried to respond to everyone, so forgive me if I haven't. Across all the different platforms, it's been quite a challenge. I've been told that the podcast has been inspiring by many people, and one person asked me, how do I find the guests? And are all of them happy to be interviewed? Well, I've had one person who was unable to get legal clearance, unfortunately. One person has had to defer as they're so busy at the moment working on their global business. But other than that, every single person that I have approached has said yes. So I guess they are happy to be interviewed. I've mostly interviewed people that I know or have been recently introduced to, although I'm now getting a flurry of people approaching me, keen to be on the show, and I've had to build a whole spreadsheet listing everyone who's keen to be a potential guest. I knew the podcast would be something of value to an audience, but I have been blown away by the positive reviews and the messages I've received. Some truly heartfelt messages which have actually made me cry with joy. It's been an emotional 13 days since the launch, but worth every moment. I would like to share with you a handful of the messages that I have received. Listen to the podcast this morning and I'm loving it. It is the water to the seed I planted that is desperate to grow, but it's still finding its roots. Talking in metaphors is so much easier. Taking it all in to grow and improve and explore my work and thinking of what new roads to explore. So very inspiring. Thanks. Thanks, Amy. #kudos. You make a huge difference. #making an impact. I've listened to the first 5 of the Focus on Why podcasts. These are amazing and inspirational stories. Thank you, Amy, and to all your guests. Serotonin-soaked sunshine personified. That's how I've been described. Wow, thank you. What a description. Hard one to live up to, but I'll try. This is what someone said about Anna Parker-Naples. Yet another inspirational guest talking about her why. I love listening to your story and your why. Amazing to hear your growth and how you inspire others to become visible. As a working mum, it resonated with me and how you want to inspire your kids to see what you can achieve if you put your mind into it. Also, you said failure has to be part of the journey to truly succeed. I absolutely agree with what you say is what you are. Thank you for your story, Anna, and a great choice of guest, Amy. 5 stars, what more can I say? Visibility is so important. I am doing more of it, uncomfortably. It's challenging me to question why I do what I do daily and begin to search deeper within to make changes for the better and get more out of life. I love listening to other stories, knowing that they are normal, everyday people making a huge difference to others' lives as well as their own. Listening to Amy tell her story to kickstart a new podcast series has reinforced my desire to seek out the why in my life so that I can start to make better decisions and take clear action to deliver the outcomes I want to see in all areas of life. Powerful stuff, Amy. I love listening to stories of how people, especially women, start their journeys from zero and built their own businesses and achieved because they have focused on their why. I listened to Joe and Sam's episodes and have attained many golden nuggets of information that I can implement in my life and business. These are just some of the reviews I've received, and as you can see, there is clearly a need for this podcast. So I'm going to keep on going with it, bringing in more and more guests from different backgrounds with different stories and different whys. In this episode today, I just want to go through the recent episodes that have come out, just pulling out a few of the key moments that I felt I wanted to highlight. In Anna's podcast, she talks about why it is important to be visible. Why is it important to be visible? Why do we need to be figuratively centre stage? Well, I think it really depends on why we need to be on a stage. For me, I'm confident standing on that stage because It's actually not about me at all. I'm happy to be delivering what I'm delivering right now and speaking out because I know that this is bigger than me. It's all about the people that will benefit from hearing what I can offer by bringing together the guests on the podcast to share their perspectives, their journeys, their experiences. I talk about this with one of the upcoming podcast guests, Gitanjali, about how curiosity and confidence can wane as we age. And that's something that Anna talks about in this episode as well. We're curious as children, but that tends to wane as we get older. Why? Anna shares how she discovered her voice and how, because it benefits others, she is delivering the message and being as visible as possible to do so. Anna's highest purpose is to awaken, to turn the lights on. She found her voice, she took action, and it took anger to spur her on, to take on massive action. I love the metaphor she uses, standing on the top of the mountain and seeing all the other leaders waving their flags across to her. She realised that those awards that she was winning were not really for her. They were for other people's words, not her own. She needed to find her own voice, to own her own voice again. It was important for her to be visible, and she saw the potential in so many others. By becoming visible herself, she's enabled so many other people to get out of their comfort zone to become visible. Are you being seen? Are you visible? Are you standing out as an authority in your field? For years, I was only visible for a relatively small number of people, mostly those I saw from day to day at school pickups and drop-offs. But 2012 was a pivotal year for me and for my visibility in public, as I won an Outstanding Service to Cricket award and I was team leader games maker at the London Olympics. Suddenly, I was visible again and my world started to get bigger. In 2016, I started to network in the property industry, attended courses and set up a property mastermind, and my world once more got a bit bigger. In 2018, I stepped completely out of my comfort zone, became even more visible, speaking at network events, starting to host a network event, and began posting more on social media. I even did a few Facebook Lives, even though my first one was recorded sideways, but it's still there, you can go and check it out. This started to open up new possibilities for me, where I connected with a bigger audience sharing experiences. In 2019, I started podcasting, and my whole world overnight became global, reaching out to over 82 countries through the Property Vault podcast, meeting so many incredible people, including all of my property sisters. My world is so much richer purely because of becoming more visible. The Focus on Why podcast is now in 28 countries and it's only been going for 13 days. I'm actually excited to be visible because I know what a difference it makes. Listening to the reviews I've just read out, I'm making an impact purely because I've willingly stepped outside of my comfort zone. And Anna's message is a big one. Getting visible makes a difference. How visible are you? Are you still in your comfort zone? Do you have a message that you could share? Moving on to Valter's podcast. Valter is on a clear mission to create a better world, to become that best version of himself. And it all goes back to a single promise he made to his sister. This promise drives him in his everyday work. For him, his work is never done. He needs that constant improvement, that constant drive to be that better version. And that's why when I introduced Valter onto the Focus on Why podcast for his episode, I described him as the greatest student of life. Why? Because of his voracious appetite to consume knowledge. Valter reads more books than anyone I've met. More importantly, he applied this knowledge, this accumulated knowledge, into his businesses. I've said it before, but Anton Chekhov said, knowledge is of no use unless you apply it. It's so true. There's no point listening to this podcast unless you apply the knowledge you hear and make some changes in your life. As a child growing up, Valter did not have access to this knowledge. He did not have the role models where he could emulate the traits he wanted to display. He did not have the opportunities to excel in life. My goodness, is he making up for it now? Valter has since sought out how he could have all of these as an adult. He has unlimited access to knowledge. He has chosen multiple role models to emulate the core human traits he values. Valter creates opportunities in abundance, all because of his drive to become the best version of himself and his intense desire to create this better world. Go Valter, I know you can do it. Moving on to Shannel's podcast, wow, what an emotional journey she takes us on. Shannel proves that anyone can start again from scratch, and she's a true inspiration to her generation, to generations to come, in fact, all generations. She's a star that lights up every room she walks into, and her brightness shines on all of those around her. She's a wise soul in a young body. Her selflessness and her compassion shines through her every action, bringing happiness, warmth and gratitude wherever she is and to whoever she's with. Shannel is a great example of someone who refuses to be defined by their circumstances and refuses to allow what has happened in their past to define their future. Shannel describes herself as unstoppable and credits her family as her reason why that drives her life. She says to go that extra 1% every day, to do something every day that gets you out of your comfort zone, because that's where all the potential is, just outside that comfort zone. Since recording this episode with Shannel, I've seen what she's already gone on to do. She's already created that business she mentioned. She's found a business partner. She's found collaborative partners to help work with young children to get them out of the lives that they're currently in. As Shannel knows that they can have so much more. She's helping them to get out of their current life they're in and is encouraging them to have a much better life, getting themselves out of that comfort zone into a stretch zone. And I know for sure that Shannel is going to make a difference to a lot of people for the next generation. She's incredible. Next up is Skye. And Skye asked us to walk towards our curiosities because that's where you get into a flow state and create excellence with ease. He asked us to find what those things are, to go and find them. Did you do that? Did you find what lights you up? Did you start exploring? Skye uses the metaphor of how the cage door opened and out he flew, finally being free after decades of captivity. He described how he freed himself from being that wage slave. The universe had been sending him messages for years, but it was only at the point where he almost died when he finally understood exactly what the universe had been trying to say to him. Skye is an incredible free spirit who seeks to help, inspire, and empower as many people as possible in life. He lives his own way and values freedom to choose his own path. Skye believes entrepreneurship can transform lives, transcend circumstances, and overcome social and cultural boundaries. And what I love about Skye's approach is how his passion for life is infectious. You just can't help but be swept along with his natural energy. Skye simply answers the questions that we need the answers to, using his experience. He's a great example of someone who has acquired knowledge and wishes to share it with as many people as possible. His mission is clear. He wants to free the wage slave. He even has his own podcast called Free the Wage Slave, doing exactly that, helping people by delivering bite-sized nuggets of this is how to do it with his focused answers. In a world where we are constantly competing for attention, Skye delivers his message succinctly and with intention. Zahida told us to believe in ourselves and follow our own dreams. She told us to not live someone else's version of our own lives. She was living other people's dreams. She'd become a dentist and she hadn't followed her passion, which was in fashion, and it took her decades to realise what was a missing ingredient in her life. It was so great to see that she's now taken control of her life, become the master of her destiny. Was it coincidence that she spotted that ad for the personal development event? Far more likely to have been her reticular activating system opening her eyes, finally, to allow her to see the advert. The advert for the Entrepreneurial Business Summit for Women. She'd finally found her calling. My biggest takeaway from the podcast is that you really have to believe in yourself, and you have to then have the confidence to know that you can do whatever you want to do. Because Zahida's done it. It's never too late to be what you might have been. In my final reflection today, I'm talking about Matt's podcast, where he talks about how you only get one shot in life, how he has to have uncomfortable conversations for people to then become comfortable. He talks about how it's not about the money. It's about why you're looking to build your wealth, and then reverse engineering the plan as early as possible, to live a life of congruency, to take the Mañana out of people's worlds, focusing on the individual, giving them a bespoke plan. As with any business, it should always revolve around what the customer needs. Matt does this through building relationships and finding out what is the right path for them. Focusing on people, Matt shows us the importance of being present in the world, and the communications that you should have with your family. when to have these conversations, and also the conversations you need to have with yourself. How you create wealth is all about what it is you want and why do you want it. Those are my reflections for today. I continue to welcome your comments and remind you that you have the opportunity to connect directly with all of my guests on the Focus on Why podcast. I tag them into all the posts I put onto LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. And I see already that people are having great conversations, connecting with these guests, following up with them, and taking action after talking directly with the guests, which is just everything to me, because this is exactly what I wanted to happen with this podcast. I wanted to bring people together to enrich their lives. Finally, I just want to thank the 2 people that sent me cards in the post. They congratulated me on the launch of this podcast, and I'm very grateful to both those people. You know who you are, so thank you. Thanks again to everybody for all your support on this podcast. Remember, this is a podcast created for you, so keep listening and keep taking action. Thank you for listening to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlinson, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star iTunes review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, and become a member of the inspiring, uplifting, and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.